The car ride home was awful. Mark's relentless questions about my disappearance, laced with thinly veiled accusations, chipped away at my carefully constructed composure. And then, the cherry on top, Sandra moved in. Temporarily, Mark insisted, while she finds her feet. Ah, like that woman has ever needed help finding her feet. She's got stiletto heels, and she's not afraid to stab you in the back. Every nerve in my body is on fire. Mark has the kids upstairs, playing the devoted dad after days of stony silence. Sandra glares at me from the kitchen, supervising dinner with military precision. You feeling better, Allison? It sounds like a concern, but it drips with sarcasm. Just a little overwhelmed, I manage. It's the closest I can get to the truth. That my entire world is collapsing. And these two are the architects of my destruction. Jake's been texting nonstop. He's worried, but there's a hint of desperation in his messages now. Wants to meet. Says it's urgent. I can't risk it. Mark's on high alert, and Sandra's probably got hidden cameras in every corner of this damn house. The stifling normalcy of dinner is torture. Sandra's passive-aggressive comments about family supporting each other make my skin crawl. Mark offers empty platitudes about therapy, about giving our marriage one more shot. I want to scream. Doesn't he know he's the one who broke it all? Not just with the affair, but with the lies, the shady deals. That night, I lie awake, staring at the ceiling. I need a plan. I don't even know who the enemy is anymore. Sure, Sandra hates my guts. But is she behind the blackmail? Or is this all about Mark's tangled web of deceit? And how did Jake get pulled into this whole mess? I feel a flash of anger. At Jake for the recklessness of our affair. At Mark for being the reason I even looked elsewhere. But mostly, the rage burns inward. How did I become so blind, so complicit in my own misery? The blackmail emails haven't stopped. They've changed tone though. It's less about exposing me to Mark. More about the damage those revelations would cause him. Threats about financial irregularities. Hinting at his business dealings. So this isn't some jealous lover or scorned ex-employee. It's someone who knows exactly how to destroy him. Is that my out? I almost laugh. The wife. The scorned one. Becoming the unlikely savior. Exposing Mark's shady secrets might ruin me as well, but honestly, there's not much left to ruin. It's a risky game, and I'm already in way over my head. I desperately need an ally. Someone I trust with my life. My gut tells me it's not Beth. Not anymore. She means well, but she's too loyal. Too quick to offer the practical solution. This mess needs something more drastic. Grace, the private investigator. She's sharp. Cynical. She'll get the kind of twisted satisfaction I need out of all this. The question is, can I trust her? She knows all my dirty laundry. Holds the evidence right in her hands. If I played this wrong, the kids. My heart aches just thinking about them. How the hell do I protect them when their own father, their own grandmother, are the ones tearing our world apart? I'm their mother. I'm supposed to keep them safe, but what if I make it worse? Sleep is impossible. My mind spins in circles, every scenario ending in disaster. I need clarity, a decision. And then it hits me. Jake. He was there at the beginning. He has a stake in this, whether he admits it or not. Yes, he messed up big time, but if there's one person who understands this level of desperation, it's him. I glance at the clock. It's past 2 a.m. Screw it. I slip out of bed, careful not to wake Mark, and grab my phone. My fingers tremble slightly as I type out the message I've been avoiding. We need to talk. Tomorrow. It's life or death. My heart thuds in my ears as I stare at the computer screen. The sender is masked behind a string of random numbers and letters, yet their intent is crystal clear. It's confirmation. My tormentor knows about Jake. They know everything. I sit motionless, paralyzed by a strange mix of fear and morbid curiosity. Should I open it? Is it another twisted trap filled with photos and accusations to ensure my complete devastation? A wave of nausea hits. Maybe ignorance would have been better. But now I need to know exactly what I'm facing. My finger hovers over the mouse. Do it. A dark voice whispers insidiously. Don't be a coward. My pulse quickens as I click. The email is short, sinister. No graphic evidence of my affair, just meticulously detailed accusations. Dates and times of my rendezvous with Jake. Descriptions of our usual meeting spots. There's even an unsettling mention of the tattoo on his shoulder. The one I foolishly confided in him about. This isn't the work of an amateur. Then a veiled threat. They promise to reveal all to Mark, but only as a last resort. The implication is clear. Cooperate or face total destruction. But cooperate? How? What the hell do they want from me? Money? No, that feels too simple. This person, whoever they are, enjoys their cruelty. It's about power, control. And they have it all. I'm their puppet now, and I don't even understand the play. A chilling thought strikes. What if they don't reveal the affair? What if they set Mark up somehow, pin a crime on him? The blackmail emails hinted at Mark's shady business dealings. Could this be an elaborate revenge scheme? One where I'm just collateral damage? My phone bursts to life. It's Jake. Relief washes over me for a second. And then I remember the urgency of his earlier message. His voice is a panicked rush when I answer. Barely a greeting. Someone reached out to my brother. They know about us. They want money, Allison. A lot of money, he spills out. My stomach churns. How did they find him? How did they? I trail off, the enormity of it crushing me. I don't know. Could Mark have someone tailing me? Or I don't even know who would do this. Jake sounds close to tears. His desperation fuels my own, but I force myself to think. What did your brother say? To meet tomorrow. A secluded spot outside town. I told him I'd bring cash. Don't go, I snap back. It's dangerous. We need to go to the police. You're kidding, right? Cops? They'll expose our affair. Besides, this isn't some random mugging. Whoever's behind it is too connected. They'll know if we go to the authorities. His words hit uncomfortably close to home. There's a twisted logic in it. One that speaks to the kind of people we might be dealing with. So, what do we do then? Just give them money. I can't even get that kind of cash, I say, panic bleeding into my voice. The silence on the line stretches. It's the unspoken truth. Neither of us has any answers. I'll meet them. I need to try and reason with them. But you, Allison, Jake's voice trails off, a mixture of fear and reluctant acceptance. I know I need to disappear. I say it hollowly, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence. Where do I even go? How do I explain this to the kids? Mark's footsteps coming up the stairs snap me back into the present. I slam the laptop shut, my movements frantic. Just another day in my perfect crumbling world. My fingers tremble as I open the cabinet under the bathroom sink. My emergency stash, not the first aid kit, but the other one. The bundle of wrinkled cash I painstakingly collected. Birthday money from my parents I never spent. Forgotten checks from distant relatives. It's pitiful. Nowhere near what Jake's blackmailer demanded, but it's all I have. Pathetic. That word circles my mind like a vulture. It applies to almost every aspect of my life right now. It's pathetic that this is the best I can do. It's pathetic that I even entertained the idea that running away was a solution, let alone a practical one. Yesterday I called in sick to the soup kitchen. I spent the entire day packing a single small suitcase and making heartbreaking to-do lists for Mark. School pickup schedules, the vet's number, reminders about the allergies. It was like penning instructions for my own erasure. Mark was strangely solicitous, asking about my doctor's appointment and suggesting takeout for dinner. His guilt, or more likely his desire to regain control, is suffocating. I'm starting to see why people in these situations just cave. Give in to the blackmail. It'd be easier. Maybe I'd get some peace. A few months before the next demand, the next escalation. But the thought of rewarding this monster, this shadowy figure destroying me from afar. No. There's a flicker of defiant anger left in me, and I'm going to cling to it with all I've got. Beth calls. She's been relentless, a lifeline in this self-imposed isolation. You okay? Any word from Jake? Yeah, I force myself to say it out loud. Maybe then it'll feel more real. I gave him the money, all I could find. He's meeting them today. There's a beat of silence. Allison, that's crazy. This won't end. You know that, right? Beth's voice is sharp, frustration bleeding through. She's not wrong. What else could I do? Sit and wait for them to turn up on our doorstep? At least this way, Maybe Jake can figure something out. I try to sound convincing, but even to my own ears, it rings hollow. Beth sighs. I'm heading over. This whole thing is a mess, but you shouldn't deal with it alone. Her tone softens slightly. She's a true friend, sometimes to a fault. Her loyalty has never wavered, not even now when I'm at my least deserving. When Beth arrives, my kitchen counter is transformed into a makeshift war room. My laptop is open, displaying maps of the secluded area where Jake's meeting is supposed to take place. Beside it, Jake's cryptic text with the location details. I've been staring at it so long, the words blur and warp. What about Grace, your investigator? Can she trace the phone? Beth asks after surveying the scene. No luck. Whoever's behind the blackmail is good. It's either a burner or routed through so many proxies it's pointless. I wave a hand in frustration. I'd half hoped Grace might uncover something, anything to give a name to this faceless torment. Beth bites her lip. She knows I'm out of options, that I'm placing an impossible amount of faith in Jake and his ability to manage a situation he's ill-equipped to handle, yet she doesn't voice the obvious. We drive. It's the middle of the day, the road's busy with ordinary, unremarkable lives. I should be at school pickup, wrangling the kids into the car for soccer practice. Instead, I'm about to witness the fallout of one disastrous decision, its consequences rippling outwards in ways I can't even predict. The area Jake described is exactly as sinister as it sounded. Abandoned warehouses, overgrown lots, the relics of some failed industrial project. We park a safe distance away, using binoculars to scan the desolate landscape. Do you see him? I try to keep my voice steady, but the binoculars tremble in my hands. There, a flicker of movement outside a crumbling, half-built structure. It's Jake. My heart sinks. He's alone. My hands squeeze the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turn white. We're too far away to see clearly, but the tension between Jake and the figures looming over him is unmistakable. One, burly and menacing. Another, smaller, concealed beneath a bulky hoodie. Neither faces us. A calculated move, likely intentional from whoever set this up. Jake's an idiot, Beth mutters beside me. He should have never gone alone. A surge of guilt washes over me. Yes, it's a stupid risk, but he's doing this because of me. Because I was too cowardly to face the consequences of my actions. My stomach twists as I consider if this goes wrong. Jake might pay the price for my mistakes. We watch helplessly. The figures approach Jake, forming a semicircle. One of them gestures threateningly. They're too far for us to hear the words, but the intent is clear. It's enough to break the fragile dam holding back my panic. I can't just sit here. I almost shout, my voice raw. I fumble for the car door handle, but Beth grabs my arm. Allison, stop. We'll make everything worse. Look. Her sudden urgency forces me to focus. Jake is holding out the envelope with the cash. The exchange happens quickly. Money for silence. The figures turn to leave. It seems anticlimactic. A tense, terrible moment hanging in the air, and then it might just be over. Relief washes over me, but it quickly curdles into suspicion. This feels too easy. My tormentor, whoever they are, enjoys playing games. Would they really just take the money and disappear? The answer comes a moment later. Jake is on the ground, doubled over. One of the figures, the burly one, kicks him viciously. The other stands by, almost casually, as if this is part of the agreed-upon deal. I feel sick watching the assault unfold helplessly from afar. Oh my God, he's going to kill him. Beth's voice is a terrified whisper. I don't stop to think. There's only a primal instinct taking over. I throw the car into reverse, slamming my foot on the gas pedal. The tires squeal as I tear out of our hiding spot, aiming straight for the scene. Beth screams my name, but it's lost beneath the roar of the engine. I see the assailants scramble as the car hurtles towards them, but my focus is solely on Jake. I have to get him out of there. I can only imagine the thoughts racing through those men's minds. A surprise attack. A woman scorned coming to the rescue? I prey on whatever sliver of rationality they have left that it's enough to make them retreat before things turn truly deadly. The chaos happens in a blur. Screeching tires, shouts, Jake scrambling towards the car, Beth's panicked voice in my ear, dust and fear clogging my throat as I gun the engine and swing the car around in a whiplash turn. I don't see the men again. Jake stumbles into the passenger seat, clutching his side and gasping for breath. We speed away, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay. I babble, glancing at Jake. He's bruised, bleeding slightly, but alive. That's the only thing that matters right now. My hands still shake from adrenaline hours later, driving Jake to a discreet urgent care clinic. My thoughts were a chaotic jumble. We concocted a story about a mugging gone wrong, vague enough to explain the bruises without arousing too much suspicion. We didn't stick around long enough for questions. Get some rest, I tell him, as I drop him off in a dimly lit part of town. I'll check in later, stay off your phone for a while. He nods numbly, the fight gone out of him. We both know this is far from over. Back at home, an eerie normalcy descends. It's like the eye of a hurricane, a temporary lull before the true destruction. Mark fusses around me, a strange mix of anger and misplaced concern. He questions my erratic behavior, my unexplained trip to the doctor. I offer short replies, feigning exhaustion. He doesn't buy it entirely, but plays along for now. Sandra, ever the opportunist, swoops in under the guise of supporting the family. She cooks, cleans, casts suspicious glances my way. The kids look on, a mixture of confusion and relief. Domestic order is restored, even if the foundation it rests on is rotten to the core. My phone buzzes. It's Grace. I rush to the bathroom, locking the door behind me as if that offers any real privacy. You need to see this. Grace's voice crackles through the speaker. She's usually unflappable, but there's an urgency in her tone now that sends a shiver down my spine. Tell me, I almost whisper, bracing myself. I traced the blackmail emails further than I thought possible. Multiple redirects, dummy servers, the works. But they slipped up, left a trace. The IP resolved to a residential address. My pulse quickens. Whose address? Your mother-in-law's. The words slam against me like a physical blow. No, it can't be. Sure, Sandra hates me, but this is something else entirely. Her hatred is petty, vindictive. This calculated torment, the threats against Jake, the connection to Mark's shady dealings? It doesn't add up. Are you sure? I managed to squeak out. There has to be a mistake. Positive. No room for error. I'll send you the full report. The call ends abruptly. I stare at my reflection in the mirror. Is this what I've become? A stranger to myself, trapped in a house of horrors, surrounded by monsters disguised as loved ones. Betrayal cuts deeper than any blackmail threat. I feel a white-hot rage consume me, not towards Sandra, but towards Mark. His lies, whatever darkness he's hidden from everyone, all of it facilitated my blind complicity. Maybe Sandra is my tormentor, motivated by a twisted desire to punish him through me. It's almost laughable. I'm caught in the crossfire of a war I never saw coming. Beth arrives later that evening, armed with takeout and a bottle of wine. I don't even try to protest. We sit on the couch in my perfectly manicured living room, surrounded by the trappings of a life I no longer recognize. So what's the play, do you tell Mark? This can't continue, Beth says after a long, contemplative sip of her wine. I don't know. I stare at my reflection in the wine glass, the liquid swirling inside. It's not a question of if, but when. Everything will shatter. For the first time, I see not only the wreckage of my life, but also the possibility of rebuilding amidst the ashes. I wake to the sound of rain. The steady drumming against the cabin's roof should be soothing. Instead, it mirrors the relentless chaos raging in my head. I spent the night tossing and turning, my mind a tangled web of accusations, revelations, and desperate plans. I replay Grace's report over and over in my head. Sandra's accounts, the money trail, it all points to Jake's mysterious cousin. I still can't wrap my brain around it. Jake, my lover, turning into another villain in this twisted story? Beth texts with an update. More news coverage. Mark making public pleas for my return. Photos of the kids plastered on local newsstands. Pawns in a desperate bid for sympathy. Sandra, surprisingly, is silent. Is it calculated strategy, or did I misjudge her role in all this? My phone buzzes. It's him. Jake. We need to talk. His voice is a raspy whisper, filled with desperation and something else. Fear. Where are you? I try to keep my voice steady, but a tremor of anticipation runs through me. The end of the blackmail, or another trap. The park. The one we used to meet. Please, Allison, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. His voice trails off, a plea hanging heavy in the air. Intuition, or is it foolishness, pushes me to agree. Despite everything, there's a flicker of hope. Could this be a way out? Could Jake hold the answers, not as a perpetrator, but as an unexpected ally? The rain has stopped, leaving the park eerily empty. The swings creak in the breeze, a chilling soundtrack to my solitude. I perch on a bench, scanning the paths for any sign of Jake. There. A familiar figure emerges from the thinning mist. My heart thuds against my ribs as he approaches. Jake looks disheveled, haunted. He collapses onto the bench next to me, burying his head in his hands. I'm so sorry, he chokes out. For all of it, he explains, his voice gaining strength as he pours out the sordid truth. His cousin, a low-level grifter caught in mounting debt. The blackmail scheme that spiraled out of control. Not a grand plan, but a desperate act fueled by greed. Jake was meant to be little more than a pawn, a believable target for my affections. He never dreamt it'd escalate to threats of physical harm, or that my tormentor would turn her sights on him as well. Claire. I say her name aloud, a bitter taste in my mouth. She used you. Jake nods, shame etched across his face. She knew about my debts, knew my weaknesses. Promised a quick fix, a way out. Said you were an easy mark. A lonely rich housewife? My hands curl into fists. Betrayal slices through me, from Claire, from Jake, from my own blindness. Mark has to know, I mutter, more to myself than to Jake. It's a desperate act of self-preservation now. Mark's secrets are my shield, a weapon to wield against this woman who wants to destroy us both. Are you sure? Jake's voice holds a flicker of hope, a selfish desire to keep his own sins hidden. It sparks a flicker of disgust within me. We're all ruined anyway, I say grimly. Let's at least try to control how the wreckage falls. And with that, a plan forms. A risky, desperate plan with no guarantee of success. But what choice do I have? Other than to remain a pawn in someone else's vicious game? My hands feel clammy as I push open the heavy door of the police station. The sterile lights, the smell of stale coffee, it all brings back a visceral wave of nausea. I was here just days ago, but I feel like a different person. Stronger, hardened, stripped of the naivete that got me into this nightmare. Detective Carter greets me, his expression a careful mix of weariness and something approaching grudging respect. Mrs. Thorne? He nods curtly, gesturing toward an interrogation room. Even my name feels foreign now, a relic of a life that no longer exists. He lays it out. The charges leveled against Mark, the damning evidence, Claire's confession outlining the web of deceit. He spares me the gory details, but it's clear Mark's fall will be swift and complete. Sandra's fate is less certain, her role more calculated, hidden behind shell companies and plausible deniability. Questions follow, relentless and sharp, digging into my affair with Jake, the depths of my willful blindness. There's judgment in the detective's eyes, but also a flicker of understanding. A woman caught in her own gilded cage, fighting for survival with the only weapons she knew. Walking out of the station, I don't feel vindication, just a dull exhaustion. There's no winning here, only degrees of loss. I head straight to Mark's sprawling office, the place that was once the symbol of his success, now a target for media vultures and bankruptcy lawyers. He's hunched over his desk, a broken figure. The hatred radiating from him is palpable, but for the first time, I don't cower from it. How could you? He spits out. I gave you everything. Everything was a lie, Mark, a house of cards built on stolen money and other people's ruin, I retort, my voice steady. There's no room for his self-pity, not when my own life is in shambles. The fight leaves him, replaced by a bitter resignation. I watch him sign papers I only half understand, legal jargon that translates into a future far less lavish than the one I was promised. There's a small satisfaction in seeing his world crumble, a sliver of justice in his downfall. Beth is my lifeline through the ensuing chaos. We spend countless nights poring over documents, deciphering legal strategies. She's both my lawyer and my rock, a constant in a world devoid of any familiar ground. My children, their faces haunt my sleepless nights. Too young to understand, old enough to sense the brokenness. Shared custody becomes a battleground, Mark wielding their hurt as ammunition against me. It's a pain unlike any I've ever known, the guilt of my choices cutting deepest now. The volunteering starts as an act of desperation, a need to fill the empty hours, to feel some kind of purpose besides untangling a lifetime of deceit. The victim support group is where I end up, women and men, their eyes mirroring my own haunted desperation. Their stories unfold in hushed tones in sterile meeting rooms, stolen inheritances, retirement funds gambled away, betrayals that shatter families. Listening, I see the human cost of Mark's greed. I help where I can, small gestures against an ocean of suffering. There's no redemption in it, only a desperate grasping for a way to make amends, to rebuild myself from the inside out. 1 year later, sitting in a crowded coffee shop, I see him. Jake. He looks older, thinner, a shadow of the man I thought I knew. I freeze, unsure if I should hide, run, or face him head on. He notices me, a flicker of recognition, hesitation. Then he walks over. Can we talk? He asks, his voice hoarse. Awkward silences stretch between stilted apologies. Shared regrets are spilled alongside bitter truths. We dissect the wreckage of our choices, knowing neither of us deserves absolution, perhaps not even forgiveness. As he gets up to leave, a strange understanding settles between us. There's no promise of a second chance, of rekindled passion, only a shared acknowledgement of the storm we both weathered and the uncertain paths that lie ahead. My walk home is solitary. The future is still hazy, fraught with custody battles, uncertain finances, and the lingering sting of betrayal. But for the first time in a long while, I feel a sliver of hope. Not for a fairy tale ending, but for something real, something built on the shattered remains of the life I once knew. Because at the end of it all, that's all I had returned home from business trip earlier than planned, and I had the all too natural idea of surprising my husband with my return and with a nice dinner. I hid myself in the living room closet, trying not to laugh out loud with excitement from seeing him all surprised and happy to see me, when the front door finally opened and I could hear his voice. But then, I also heard a woman's voice that I didn't recognize, and in a few moments, I saw them come into the living room together, arm in arm. My husband was with another woman, a stranger to me. At that moment, I realized that everything was a lie, and what was going to be a surprise became revenge. I was never going to forgive him, and he was going to pay well for his actions. How could he betray me, his own wife? Prepare yourself, darling, for what might be your last few seconds of precious life. My name is Wendy, and I'm a 32-year-old officewoman. After graduating from college, I got a job at a major company that manages gardening equipment, and since then, I've been working hard as a career woman with a potentially bright future ahead of her. Up until about a year ago, I only cared about my working life and my personal success as a working member of society, but a year ago, I met Landon, my future husband. We met through a mutual friend who invited the two of us to a small drinking party at a nice tavern downtown, and he worked in another smaller company. We hit it off, and after 17 months of being a couple, we got married, and we lived a happy life together as a working couple. My husband works for a small business in agricultural machines, and he never works overtime, and I don't work overtime either, and I also came home earlier than he did, so whenever I did, I would often wait for him after I cooked something for dinner. It was hard to do housework after work, but my husband worked hard in a physically demanding job, and my determination to cheer up with a meal was pretty impressive, so I didn't really mind doing the housework. As long as Landon could rest at home, nice and peaceful, when he was tired, that was good enough for me. A part of me also wanted him to think that I was a good wife for him. So, in my own way, I was doing my best at home too. Then, one day, it was decided that I was going to go on a long-term business trip. This business trip was related to an impending promotion of mine, and I was very excited. I even thought that this business trip would decide the fate of my career, if not my life itself. But during the trip, Landon would be alone in the house. He's a grown man who can take care of himself like it was a walk in the park, so there wasn't any need to worry. But one thing you should know about my husband, he is a catastrophically poor cook, and he's never done a day's housework in his life. Up until we got married, he was living in his parents' home, and everything was taken by my mother-in-law, Mrs. Braths. Landon can't even do his own laundry, but nowadays, in this advanced society, we have delivery service for meals, and there's a laundromat a short walk away from where we lived for laundry. I was sure he could manage. And while I was on my business trip, my husband was going to celebrate his 34th birthday. We used to spend his birthday together, but because of this stupid business trip, we couldn't spend it together this time. Landon, honey, we won't be able to celebrate your birthday together this year. I'm so sorry. Oh, Wendy, darling, it's okay. It can't be helped in this case. You have work to do. But good luck with your work, darling. I've always loved you because you always try to do your best. We'll do something to celebrate it again when you come back. How's that? That idea sounds awesome. Thanks so much. And I'm really sorry. I'll do my best as always. With some kind words from my husband, I got even more determined to do great, and I headed out on my business trip. While I was away, I was very busy. Work often lasted until after I usually went home. This made it difficult for me to find enough time to call my husband or have a real-time conversation over text messages. I did call him every once in a while, and by that I mean a couple of days. But when I could reach him, perhaps he was busy at the moment because he never answered the phone. I couldn't get in touch with him, other than messages, and it just wasn't the same. I missed him, but Landon had sent me off with his great words of encouragement, so I focused on working hard to land that big promotion. My hard work paid off in the end, because I finished a little bit early, and that meant that I could go home from my business trip a few days earlier than scheduled. I was so happy. I was able to come home on my husband's birthday, even though I told him I couldn't make it because of this business trip. I had the all-too-natural idea of surprising my husband with my return, and with a nice dinner on the day of his birthday. The plan was that I would leave work early on his birthday and bring home Chinese food and a nice birthday cake for him, and the wallet he wanted as a present. I had it all ready. I could only imagine how happy he would be to see me back home on his birthday. Just envisioning the look of surprise and excitement he would surely have on his face made me so eager to hurry up and get home. I arrived home long before he always did. That night would probably be the same as always. He would be home by 6 p.m. To surprise him, I hid in the living room closet. But even after 6 p.m., he still wasn't home. I wondered if it might be because he was celebrating his birthday with a bunch of his colleagues, and as I slowly began to be convinced that's what he was doing, I felt grateful for his friends. But I still wanted to see the look of surprise and excitement on Landon's face. So I didn't call it a night, even when it was after 6:30 p.m. I remained in the closet and waited for the familiar hum of his car. I was pretty tired from my long and tedious business trip where I spent an ungodly amount of time in front of papers and computer screens, and before I knew it, I was fast asleep. I only realized I was when I woke up a few hours later from the sound of a rumbling car engine. I opened the closet door slightly, and through the window, I saw the signal lights of the car scintillating. My husband had come home at last. I quietly closed the closet door and waited for him for another few minutes. I heard the front door open, and the familiar sound of Landon's business shoes echoed through the house. I had a good time today. Thank you for the delicious dinner. It was delicious, wasn't it? It was nice to spend your birthday with you, sweetie. Why in the goddamn world of ignorant bliss did I hear a woman's voice? One that I didn't recognize, in any case. And that sounded suspiciously young. I was so upset, but I tried not to make a sound in the closet. Seriously, I can't believe how happy a simple business trip could make me. I feel like every day I get to spend with you, Clara. I'm undoubtedly the happiest man in the world. It's actually insane how great I feel right now. Thank you, sweetie. I love spending time with you too. I can't help but feel sorry for your wife, but I always tell myself that it can't be helped. It's okay, darling. I'm only married to her for her money. You're the only woman I've ever loved. Am I really? Are you seriously only married to her because she's got bags of money stashed away? I know it'd be so hard for me when I discover my own loving husband says things like that about me. There's nothing good about her except for her money, literally the only thing she is going for her. And they got ridiculously excited as they piled on the bad things about me. I was shell-shocked, but unknowing of my presence in the room, they went on talking shit about me, laughing all the while. I always have an amazing time with you, Clara, but if I imagine that I only had a relationship with that hag, it's like suffocating me. It's a real nightmare. Then you're lucky I'm here. I'll say this again. I never loved Wendy. I love you so much, and I'm going to do what we can to be together, okay? Then they went to take a bath. I took advantage of the opportunity and left the house quietly. Maybe the better option would have been to interrogate the two slimy traitors right then and there, but the shock at what I'd witnessed was just too overwhelming. It was extremely difficult to prevent myself from hyperventilating and screaming in sorrow. I couldn't face the reality just yet. I needed time to gather my senses first. I booked a hotel room nearby and stayed there that night. As I was trudging towards the hotel, my emotions got the better of me, and I suddenly started to cry. I sat down on a bench in a small park, ripped open the box that contained Lana's birthday cake, forced my fingers around a large clump of dessert, and stuffed it in my mouth. The cream tasted very sweet, and somehow my tears, which were streaming into my mouth at this point, added a nice little tang at the beginning of each bite. From the point of view of passerbys, I was basically a woman dressed in office uniform, stuffing a ridiculous amount of birthday cake into my mouth, crying all the while, and getting cream in every nook and cranny of my face. I definitely looked a suspicious person, but during that time of personal crisis, what people thought of me was the least of my problems, and I couldn't care less. After crying a legitimate rainstorm, my sadness towards the situation gradually transformed into anger towards my husband. I don't mean to say that he owes me something, but no one can deny I've done so much for him. I cooked for him, did the housework for him, all because he couldn't do shit around the house, and when he told me there was something he wanted, I went, and actually something nice for him. I got him a birthday present that cost thousands of dollars, and he was still willing to cast me aside as an ATM machine and never accept me as the one he chose to spend the rest of his life with. Call me a money grubber, will you? Well, that doesn't come for free, my dearest. I threw the wallet I'd bought for his birthday as hard as I could into a nearby trash can. You've got some nerve to cheat on your wife while she's away on a business trip, my dearest, I muttered to myself as I left the park. On the way to the hotel, I decided to get a divorce, but I knew he would only be pleased if I divorced my husband. I decided to really make him suffer for his crimes before divorcing him. For a while thereafter, I continued to stay at the hotel. I was supposed to go back home next week, so until then, I can't go home. But I did actually stop by my house on the way, and the fact that I found Landon's car was strange, very strange indeed. At this time of night, he's supposed to be at work still. I called his company posing as a client and asked the receptionist at the other end of the phone, "Excuse me, is Mr. Landon Brass present at this hour?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, but it seems Mr. Brass has taken a vacation for about a week." "Oh, is that so? Thank you for telling me." So my husband is on vacation for a week. That led me to wonder if the woman whom he was having an affair with worked for the same company. I checked. Well then, is there someone by the name of Clara? I'm so sorry, ma'am. It seems Miss McIntyre is also on vacation for about a week. Is there anything you need to inform us about? If it's urgent, I can put someone else on the phone to assist you. No, it's not urgent. Thank you so much. Have a nice day, sir. After I said that, I hung up. I found out that my husband was having an affair with one of his coworkers. I was so sick of his stupid bullshit I wanted to throw up. I couldn't comprehend the fact that I used to love Landon Brass. Now, I feel nothing but contempt, disgust, and fury. I stayed out of the house for a while, checking on them both from a distance. After perhaps an hour or so, I saw them having inappropriate physical contact as they exited the house. They got into Landon's car and drove off somewhere. They were each carrying a large suitcase, so naturally, I assumed the two snakes were going on a trip, taking an entire week off from work just to go on a vacation of adultery. What a couple of carefree jellyfishes. I made sure my husband was out of the house completely before I went inside. I decided to take all of my valuables and all the things I needed and leave the house, never to return to live again. After I was sure I had packed everything, I made one last check of the house, which was in fact a kind of formal goodbye to the building. I loved that house. It was perfect for both of us to have a nice and peaceful time to rest after a hard day's work, and the backyard was absolutely beautiful. Landon and I were going to build a life together, and the first step was buying this house with most of what we'd saved up. It was not a new house by any means, but considering the fact that I was going to live in it with the person I loved, it was the best house I could have asked for. But now, I was living in it with a traitor, and I didn't feel comfortable at all. My biggest desire was to leave that house as quickly as I could, but my old love for this house made me linger for another few minutes. I took a walk around the inside. I discovered a lot of the woman's belongings, Clara's belongings. I became positive that while I was away on my business trip, they were indeed planning on living together in their cheesy, unfaithful excuse of passion. Assorted lotions, shampoos, conditioners, and items of makeup that weren't mine lined the nightstand in Landon's bedroom. His closet lodged her clothes, anything ranging from casual jeans and sweaters to beautiful dresses to inappropriately tiny blouses. The room had a fruity smell to it, and I later found out why. Landon's old bedsheets, which were now nowhere to be found, had been thrown away, probably, and replaced with new, orange-scented ones. When I saw all this, I was beyond angry. I was utterly mortified. I wondered what all the time we had spent meant exactly. Which had we been trying to build up the whole time? I left the house, and first went straight to a trusted lawyer who helped me prepare for the divorce, and then I went to a detective agency to gather evidence against the affair. When I went to the house the second time, I probably should have taken pictures of the evidence, but I felt like if I took pictures with my phone, the scene would burn itself into my mind in the worst way possible, and I didn't like it. Additionally, I couldn't stay in the hotel forever, so I rented an apartment that could accommodate a tenant for a month at a time. That's where I put all the stuff I had packed and taken away with me when I left the house. I had to find a new, bigger, better place to live. By this time, I had already made up my mind on getting a divorce, and nothing was going to change my mind. I no longer had any love for Landon Brass, and he was dead to me, but something told me it wasn't enough. Of all the pain he had caused me, I have to pay him back with pain tenfold. Otherwise, my gut would never be satisfied, nor would it ever forgive me for backing out. As I went about my work as usual, I waited for a call from the detective agency, and I got a phone call from at what was quite possibly the best time ever. They said they had accumulated enough evidence, which was excellent news. I asked them to keep that evidence in a secure place while I went back to my husband's house. There was a car parked outside, so I knew he must have returned from his trip of adultery. After I confirmed he was inside the house, I headed to the cake shop and bought a cake before I went back to my husband's house. I unlocked the door, and I quietly entered the building. I made sure he was not in the living room, and then proceeded to approach his bedroom door. As I got ever closer, I could hear my husband and the woman known as Clara McIntyre, whom he was having an affair with, inside. I held up the box that contained the cake, opened it up quietly, took out the dessert, set the box aside in the corridor, and burst into the room. "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you." My voice startled them both, and their faces expressed the purest shock I'd ever seen. It was priceless, and I wanted to laugh, but keeping a straight face here and going through with the plan was key. Ignoring their ridiculous faces, I kept on singing. "Happy birthday, dear traitor, happy birthday to you." Once I finished singing, I threw the entire cake at my husband as hard and as accurately as I could. The dessert landed with a satisfying splat all over his naked upper body, and some of the cream flew into the naked woman as well. Hey, what the frick are you doing, Wendy? What the frick am I doing? Well, look who's talking. And what do you think you're doing, eh? Well, I mean, wait, I didn't know you were home already. Why the hell didn't you call me? Why didn't I call you? Listen, buddy, I'm about to clue you in on the truth here. I was already here on your birthday. I hope I didn't say anything more to help you understand. Oh my God, there's no way. My husband's mouth started to spasm, and his darling lover must have been more speechless than he. Her mouth gaped open and gave me the impression she physically couldn't get it shut. I think you just stole my frickin' line, Mr. Brass. There's no way I'm seeing any of this right now. Could you explain to what exactly it is you're doing? Well, this is, what does you know about this place, madam? This is my house, you know. Well, perhaps my sudden intrusion really did the job to leave them catatonic. They were visibly upset, and they were not answering any of my questions. I'm only a money grubber, after all, and this lady is the only one you love, right? Well, I have just the remedy for that. From now on, you will pay me back all the money that you stole from me. I'm going to demand alimony from you, and you better pay me back every single penny you owe me. No sooner had I uttered the word alimony than my husband gasped, and then I looked at the woman whom he was having an affair with. She was shaking. Well, don't just stay there where you are, in that uncomfortable position. Get down on the floor, on your knees. I'm sure you'll feel a lot better that way. The moment I told her so, they both rushed off the bed, kneeled before me, and bowed their heads towards the floor. I'm sorry, I was having a little bit of fun with her. Since you were away working, I missed you, and the loneliness was getting to me. Yes, that's all true. I have a husband myself, but he never pays any attention to me, and I was in desperate need of someone who appreciated my company. Exactly, and we were actually talking about ending things right when you barged in, Wendy. We were just saying goodbye to each other. Yes, we were. We both agreed it wasn't good for the ones we chose to marry originally. We literally just broke up, Wendy. Cheaters, liars, backstabbing traitors. I'm pretty sure all of these things describe the same two people. Let's see who can guess the right answer. I heard you two outside earlier, loud and clear. Bullshit. You were talking about ending things. What you were really talking about was taking a 2-week trip to Japan next. You've got to be kidding me. How do two people stoop to such low humanity? Damn it. That's what I said, and both he and the woman went deathly pale, indicating I hit the nail on the head. You guys are such assholes. I already mentioned I heard you guys talking shit about me the night of this bastard's birthday. With me having this much knowledge about what you think about my frickin' existence, you really think I'm gonna whatever horseshit excuse your bird brains come up with? I'm sorry. I admit that I cheated on you, and I deeply apologize. I hope you can forgive me. Just because you act all responsible and innocent right now doesn't mean you're any closer to being forgiven. I'm sorry, I really am. I really do believe that what I did was wrong. Divorce me. Now. Please, please don't say such things, Wendy. Really, it was just for fun. Ma'am, on behalf of Landon, I'm begging you, don't divorce him. Please. The name's Clara, right? Who are you to talk to on behalf of Landon Brass? Don't you dare forget that you're eligible for paying me alimony too. Eh. But, I was just having an affair. It's not like we were married, Landon and I. I don't think the law states that you can demand alimony from me because it was just fun and games. I don't believe this. Tell me what exactly is your IQ score. I'm just dying to know. Of course I can legally demand alimony from you. You knew the man whom you were with was married to another woman, and yet you went on with the affair, hoping to get something nice out of it. Newsflash, lady. Nothing nice comes out of unfaithfulness. I was so stunned that this woman was pretty much claiming that the Sun was basically the world's largest pizza in the entire state of Mexico. I couldn't believe I'd lost my actual husband to a woman with zero common sense. I want a divorce. I've already hired a lawyer, so if you want to know more about the demands, you'll hear about it from him. I've also been to the detective agency, and they acquired a lot of solid evidence of your stupid affair. If you're thinking of uttering excuses to get yourself out of this, don't freaking bother. It doesn't make any sense, for one thing. And second, you'd be digging your own grave. You can't be serious. I don't want a divorce. I don't want a divorce. You even said you didn't want to talk to me. Being around me was enough to get you disgusted enough to want to run the frick away from this place. I don't know how you expect us to live with ourselves as a married couple now that the relationship is ruined. Oh wait, of course. I'm the money grubber, so you literally need me in order to survive, right? No, no, that's not it. Oh, darling, it's a shame. Because this year, I actually got you that luxury brand wallet you've been wanting for quite some time. I had it, ready for you. And I was gonna give it to you. Now it's in the trash. No. No, there's no way you. Maybe you should have stayed true to yourself. Goodbye. That's all I had to say, and I left them with their grief and shame, alone in the house. Thereafter, Mr. Brass tried calling me a few times, but I ignored them all. I left everything to my lawyer. Mr. Brass was later fired from his job. Perhaps the fact that I went to the company where he and the woman whom he was having an affair with worked, and gave them an official letter from the detective agency that contained the evidence of their adultery. Nowadays, it isn't uncommon anymore to hear about people that cheated on their husbands or wives, and it's pretty much common knowledge right now that anyone who does engage in such crimes against humanity will lose credibility in the company and in life in general. How in the world did Mr. Brass and Miss McIntyre not know anything about that? Mr. Brass was so dependent on me for living expenses, so I wouldn't be surprised if he never saved a penny. Now that he was fired, he pleaded to me through my lawyer to let him pay the alimony and monthly installments. I agreed, as long as he paid me in full. As for Miss McIntyre, she was fired from her job and was left without any money. Mr. McIntyre found out about the affair. I believe he's also demanding alimony. She tried to turn to Mr. Brass for help, but found no luck with him, as he didn't have any savings whatsoever and was now working part-time. She decided she couldn't rely on him, and thus she betrayed him and replaced him with a man who seemed to be loaded with money. But that man turned out to be quite formidable because he didn't even work, and even though he's neck-deep in debt, he never failed to waste his money on stupid things like gambling and marijuana. Knowing that neither Mr. Brass nor Miss McIntyre are living happy lives after their affair was exposed makes me feel somewhat relieved. The irony is that now I know full well it's not good to take pleasure in other people's unhappiness. I got a big promotion after that long business trip I took, and I was praised as the first woman in the company's history to be promoted to that position at such a young age, 32. There are junior staff who admire me because of this achievement and makes me subconsciously put more time and effort into my work. It's a very good thing I love my work, and now I've set myself a new challenge. To be a good boss who sets a good example for my subordinates, to be a trusted employee of the company and contribute to bringing it to greatness, and to acquire what is needed to be promoted even further up in the ranks of the enterprise. Wish me. Today I'll share with you guys how I brought my own wedding to a screeching halt when I read my vows. My fiancé and I met in a group setting through coworkers. One of our friends was a man named David. He was my best friend, so it was really nice that he got along with the girl I started dating and eventually proposed to. He quickly agreed to be my best man at the wedding. When my fiancée found out, she was really happy and said it would be perfect. I suspected her bit, but not enough to ask about it. She was friends with him too, after all. Well, fast forward to the week before our wedding. My soon-to-be bride was really excited and had been on her phone a lot. I assumed it was all wedding-related planning because she'd be on her phone and stop me in my tracks to ask what I'd prefer between the two choices. These choices didn't really matter to me by answer to make her happy. Now that I know what I know, I think she would make up things to ask me so that I wouldn't suspect her of communicating with another man. My best man, to be specific. She and I held our bachelor parties on the same night. It was extremely disappointing to me when my best man called me to let me know he couldn't attend the bachelor party he planned for me. He told me his mother was in the hospital unexpectedly, and he needed to be there with her. Well, this was totally forgivable, right? How could I be so heartless to deny or suspect him? I still had several friends with me throughout the night. I'm an active guy, So we all played basketball outside before getting cleaned up real nice and going to an upscale lounge downtown. I felt like royalty, and I hope my fiancé was feeling the same way. We were actually already living together at this point, but we agreed to abstain from sex the month before the wedding. I had no idea how difficult that was going to be. We took turns each night sleeping on the pull-out bed in the living room. When I arrived home that night, my fiancé was already home and crashed on our bed. She looked like an angel that partied for the first time tonight. I tucked her in while she slept, but as I looked around, I noticed something shiny on the floor by the edge of the bed. I picked it up and held it in my hand, looking closely. It was a fancy gold cufflink. How interesting. My wheels immediately started turning. My woman did not own any cufflinks, and I only owned one pair that did not look like this one. That could mean another man was in our bedroom. I started impulsively rubbing my face, head, and neck. This was stressful. Just then, my fiancé's phone went off. It was set to vibrate only, but I could hear it on the nightstand. While she slept, I stood beside her and read her messages. The string that stood out was the one with my best man. The most recent text was from him, 4 hours earlier at 9 p.m. As I scrolled up, I realized she invited him to her bachelorette party, even though that wasn't normally how these things worked. Further up was much worse. She told him that tonight was going to be their night, because the next day she would belong to me. He asked her if he'd ever be able to have her again. She said if he tempted her too much, he might get away with it. Messages from months ago showed how their conversation went from strictly friends to flirty. He started asking about her body, and she started showing him. They made arrangements to hang out one day, a day that I thought she was at work. And then he messaged her, asking if they should have done that. She replied with, "I've never been more sure of anything." Just like that, within 1 hour, I went from a blissful man about to be married to a broken-hearted fool plotting revenge. I sent myself 6 screenshots of the worst messages they sent, obviously escalating in severity. My plan was to read these messages when I was supposed to read my vows. This was going to be terrible. Just like what she did to me was terrible. I deleted all traces of me collecting evidence, then I took some NyQuil and crashed. The next morning, she was already gone. She left me an old-fashioned handwritten note that said she left early to get her hair and makeup done. Imagine getting all dressed up, only for someone to announce that you're a cheater in front of all your friends and family. What a great day. At this point, I was only bitter. I didn't miss her or want her to be sorry. I was ready to dump her because I couldn't believe how much she let me love her. She was my only one, and I was one of two. I got dressed really nicely. I smelled wonderful, and my hair was never so on point. A part of me felt like it was for nothing, but I convinced myself it was worth it. I thought about warning my dad about what I planned to do, but I didn't want him to convince me not to or warn other people. Just then, my best friend texted me to ask if I was on my way to the venue. As soon as I got there, he greeted me outside. He was dressed really nicely, but the only thing I wanted to know was if he had cufflinks. In a gamble, I pretended to notice he was missing one, even though I couldn't really tell. He was surprised I noticed and looked embarrassed. He said it must have got caught on something somewhere because he lost it. I asked to see the one he had up close, in case I happened to find the match. At this point, his heart was trying to get out of his chest. He was sweating. I was so amused by this but played dumb. He showed me the cufflink, and it was an exact match to the one I found and had in my pocket that very moment. I looked up at him very seriously for a few agonizing seconds. I was trying to stop myself from screaming or punching him. He could see it and asked me if I was okay. I snapped myself out of it and plastered on a fake smile. I told him of course I was okay. I was getting married today. I slapped him so hard on the back that it made him jump. I just walked into the venue. After the mind-numbing mingling and grand procession, I realized I never wanted to have a traditional wedding ever again. It all seemed so stupid and meaningless. That's when my would-be wife walked down the aisle. She was as beautiful as ever, and all the memories of how we met and how long we'd been together poured into my head. It was extremely unfair, and I sobbed. People around me seemed to notice that I wasn't happy crying. I was devastated. I barely controlled my sobs until the point where the celebrant asked me if I'd like to read my vows. This was it. I started reading messages between James and my fiancé. I mentioned the date and time of each one. It was just odd at first for everyone to be waiting patiently for me to get to the point. But then, as they listened, I started to read messages that were flirty and not something either of them would be proud of. They started to shift uncomfortably and looked around, noticing that everyone in the building was staring at them. My bride asked me what I was doing and what I was reading. After another text, she told me to stop. Then I read the really inappropriate messages. Him telling her he needed to bury himself inside her again, and her telling him to come over because I left the house. By now, everyone was talking amongst themselves, and my fiancé was trying to grab my phone from me. My best man suddenly walked out, but he was followed by 5 of my groomsmen. As she tried to grab my phone, I shouted that I had pictures and videos they'd send each other if anyone wanted to see them. That's when people started getting up and leaving. The celebrant asked if we were still getting married, and I laughed loudly and sarcastically. My ex was now on her knees in her white dress, sobbing at the altar. Her bridesmaids had no idea what to do. They just stood there, frozen. Some of them might have known she was sleeping with him, or at least saw them being flirty. It was great to see that no one rushed to her side to help her feel better. I went outside to see what had become of my best man. His car was trapped between the 5 men. They were yelling and screaming at him, in disbelief that he would betray me as he did. At this point, I was done with all the drama. My head hurt, I felt like I got the revenge I wanted and just needed to take a nap. I told them to back off and let him go, that keeping him here wasn't going to help anything. Just as they backed off, my would-be bride came running out of the venue. She was being chased by her bridesmaids as they shunned her, calling her a terrible person. She ran behind the best man's car for about 10 yards before he saw her in the mirror and stopped. She got in and they left. I turned around and saw a majority of our wedding guests watching what just happened. Many of them walked up to me and offered me hugs and words of advice. It was weird. It was like I was suddenly in a grief counseling session with a mixture of our family and friends. Well, they weren't her friends anymore. Neither of them received support or contact from the people they once relied on and knew so well. They moved out of state together, but only lived together for 1 year. After that, my ex moved back in with her disappointed and criticizing parents. What a gigantic waste of time. She tried to ask me out again after all this, and I called her crazy. I still haven't heard from my best friend, but that's fine. I couldn't be friends with him anymore anyway. My friends and family never let me give up hope or get too depressed. I haven't started dating again, but I know a good girl I'm gonna ask out. It's hard to believe that someone would be with me and only me. That's because my ex planted a seed of doubt. The only way I know to fight this doubt is to take my time getting close to people. Ask them anything I want to know and tell them what's happened to me so they understand where I'm coming from. Wow, Opie. Not many people experience the level of stress you went through here. I love how you had the strength and determination to collect and read messages at the wedding for all to hear. I think it was the best way for her to learn from her mistake. I'm so glad to hear that you had so much support on that day and afterward. You did not deserve to be betrayed like this by your best friend and fiancé of all people. I enjoyed listening to your story and finding that even though they escaped criticism together, they didn't last very long. That had to add another sting of guilt to each of them. I think at that point they definitely realized they screwed up their own lives too, not just everyone they held dear. It sounds like you know how to keep moving forward. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, Opie. We appreciate you and your resilient emotional recovery. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.